That takes a certain amount of humility, too, to present something and to open yourself up to critiques beforehand.
It does. And I'd be less than honest if I didn't say at times it stings. I'll think, boy, that is a tremendous, tremendous illustration. And one of them will say, it seems kind of corny to me. But I've learned to trust them enough that now I still may do it, but now it's with a little bit more of a grain of salt as I do that. But the more I can learn, the better I can teach. Good teachers are always great learners. Great communicators are always those who are willing to be communicated to by other trusted communicators.
The logistics of your presentation, you script every word. Some presenters do keywords, many different ways of doing this. Now, as you script every word, your presentation is not one that we feel as though you're reading.
Yeah.
How do you accomplish that?
A lot of experience, that's to be sure, and many years of experience. But the reason why I script, for one thing, it helps me time it out. I know by the time I get to 10 half pages, I'm at 30 minutes, all right? But another reason why I script, one writer puts it well, thoughts disentangle themselves when they come through the fingertips before they come out your lips. And I've recognized that specific turns of phrases, we are people who love to listen, verbal hooks I call them. By putting them into print, I may not be able to recollect all of them, but by and large, having let it flow in print, seeing if it works being read, it gives me far greater advantage than to verbalize and articulate. For me, if I'm a little bit, I'll just tell the story of this. I'll just explain that. I find myself, as I reflect, thinking, I didn't quite say it the way I wanted to. I missed that one nuance that could have been there. And by manuscripting, for me, at least, it's there once, if never again.
Several great presenters say to script and then memorize even stories that they themselves, experienced. Just for that reason, just so everything can be concise and the correct words at all times. Have you found, since you have been writing this for so many years, that you are a better communicator?
I think so. And the reason why I can say that is because I always save. I've saved 28 years worth of talks. And so, in fact, this series on James that I'm doing right now, I did over 20 years ago, and I saved all of his manuscripted messages. Oh my goodness. I look at those and I think, why did I say it that way? It's terrible. I'm my own worst critic. I look at that and think, oh my goodness, it's a wonder everyone didn't walk out. So I look at that versus today, and I think I have improved. Formerly, I did this, and this is a typical, I think, of communicators. We have a tendency to think that more is better. I've learned that people are not as capable as you think they are to grasp and then live out truth. I've learned to simplify. I've learned to clarify. I've learned to reduce the content, increase the application, and give it a heavy dose of passion.
Also transparency, I've noticed, too.
Yeah. That's one thing that my folks will say. You'll stand up there and just undress yourself in front of folks. And obviously one has to be wise and discerning in that. But I've discovered that Paul put it this way, the Apostle Paul, follow me as I follow Christ. Follow me as I follow Christ. And I think for our congregation, I've recognized I am no different than you, and I'm certainly no better than you. So let me tell you, as a fellow struggler, where I've begun to get a handle on this. And let's grow together. And many times the only way to do that is to share times when I have failed miserably, when I've hurt people greatly. And it's at times like that that I say, guys, I'm a learner too, but we can grow together.
When you talk about learning and you look at your scripts from 20 years ago and you see now that you now can write them better, or maybe your life experiences have changed, isn't that exciting though? Isn't that a wonderful part of communicating and growing?
It is, and I think when you're in the business of communication, it is one place where you can see improvement. There are other jobs that are wonderful jobs, but you may not be able to as easily see improvement. Now, to be sure, it's a double-edged sword. You can also see where you have retrogressed, where you have failed, where you have begun to get a little loose in the turns regarding your preparation. And you do what I call verbal DeSelming, which is a sense of you say a lot of things, but you don't say much at all.
Yes, I think everyone who is listening can understand and relate to that. And that is so frustrating as a listener. And I know personally I'd like to say to people, but give me content. You've just given me verbiage. Another way, and since this is called the Verbal Edge, and I'm so excited about everything you have said, is reading. How has reading improved your vocabulary and your ability to present?
I think that if you hope to be a great communicator, you have to be a voracious leader. I'm not saying that there can't be other life experiences that help, and they do. But for me, reading broadens and deepens. And I read the newspaper on a daily basis, I read news magazines, I read Sports Illustrated, I read. But it not only gives me slants of life. When I read, I see turns of phrases. I can read a columnist from Sports Illustrated and see how she wrote, and I'll think, that's brilliant. How she came in through the back door with that communication. How she ambushed the people with her point. And I recognize that I can read not only for content, but for style. I'm convinced that many communicators would improve their teaching and preaching, their communication in general, greatly if they would just commit themselves to reading 30 more minutes a day.
30 minutes. You do that, and you also write in addition to your presentations, don't you, every day?
Yeah, I journal personally, and so I write to myself. Of course, in the career path that I've chosen, I have a lot of messages and a lot of communication with other people, so I write as well. Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest to people who are starting out in the presentation realm, and we all will give presentations? How can they heighten their skills?
I think, first of all, you have to recognize that you have a message you want to share. All too many people simply want to communicate to hear themselves talk. That's not communication, that's talking. Communication is the transference of ideas to another. To my way of thinking, it's unto their betterment. So unless you have something worth communicating, you're not going to be a communicator. Secondly, you have to become skilled in it. And you can become skilled in it by listening to programs like this, by reading, by taking classes. The other thing I've discovered is by listening to great communicators. Multiple times during the week, I'll get online and I'll listen to other communicators. To be sure, the content helps, but I listen to them also that I might learn from them. Read great books, listen to great communicators, and be willing to be evaluated. Many people simply don't want to be critiqued. And as soon as someone says, you know, you could do that better, they shut it down. Until and unless you're willing to let someone say, your baby has big ears, or I know you had a great thought, it just didn't get to me, you'll never get better. The other thing I think I'd add, and this lends itself toward my career, is this. I think that there is really a talent and a gift of communication. And we can't underestimate that. I am terrible at music. I can't draw. I'm no good. I'm no good with a hammer, for crying out loud. But I can talk well. I have to understand this is my strength. Those are my weaknesses. All too many young preachers, I would say, they believe they have the gift of preaching, but no one seems to have the gift of listening to them. And unless, in fact, you have a degree of talent or gift, you'll spin your tires a bit. So do some personal assessment. Is this the best way for me to express my communication? Does it have to be public? Does it have to be in front of a large crowd? Or is God, or simply in myself, am I called to be a writer, to be a one-on-one counselor? Where's my niche? What am I good at? Or what am I not good at?
Dave, one of the reasons why I wanted you on this program is because you are an accomplished speaker, yet you still work as hard or maybe harder than you did when you began. And people who are speakers, I wanted them to know every speech just requires the same amount of effort. Yeah. I remember talking personally to Zig Ziglar, who said when he was in town a few years ago, he went through his entire speech the night before at the hotel, and he'd given it hundreds of times.
Yeah, my final edits, by the time I've got it in the can, this is now Friday morning, I'll come back in Saturday, literally go through the whole thing again. And we get it very early on Sunday morning. I'll come in, I'll go through the whole thing again. And then I speak 3 times on Sunday morning. So the numbers of times when I've gone through, and at times I'll actually read it out loud. I'm reading it, but I go through, I wonder, how does it sound? How does it sound? Is it still smooth? And many times I'll still say, I've got to cut that out. That got too wordy. I went off on a tangent there. That's not right. Sometimes even on Sunday mornings after our first gathering, I'll ask a couple of people on staff, what do you think? And they'll say, that went too long. Cut there, expand there. And now I'm really on the fly, I have to do it. I'm not quite as good at that, but I also recognize that I have 2 more shots to make it better, and so I'll try.
In what ways do you plan to continue to grow as a communicator?
Well, I want to keep reading. I want to keep growing. One of the things I'm learning, especially with some of my travel, is I'm discovering a great joy in sharing with other cultures. And so whether I'm over in Europe sharing with a group of young believers, or whether I'm down in Congo in the middle of Africa sharing, and to watch those eyes come alive with information and transformation is a thrilling thing for me. But in light of the fact that I'm getting a bit older, I also am finding myself knowing great joy in sharing with young communicators. As I share with those on our staff, I've been an adjunct professor before at a local university in communication, and I find myself now recognizing there are other young communicators maybe that can learn from my mistakes and maybe learn a little bit from what I do well.
And when you say mistakes, how do you handle them? Can you think of things that might have gone wrong just in the next minute or so?
Oh, so many things go wrong, and sometimes it's simply verbal faux pas. There are times I find the people chuckling and I wasn't trying to be funny, so I know I said something wrong. But at other times my mistakes are simply going off on tangents. Again, until you have the point in mind and can drill it home, tangential teaching does no one any good. And so I find myself thinking, did I make the point? Did I drive it home? Did I show passion? And did I apply it personally?
The other thing is you don't draw attention to any mistakes. I was, a couple of weeks ago, my husband said, did you notice that Dave dropped his notes? Well, I hadn't noticed because I'm one of those kinesthetic people who's writing notes, and didn't notice it. You didn't draw attention to it. You didn't skip a beat. You continued doing what you do.
A communicator has to realize that when he or she communicates, especially in front of others, there are things you can take seriously and things you can't take seriously. Mm-hmm. You're going to find times when you're going to drop your notes, you're going to get in a coughing jag, you're simply going to say some statement. I've had occasions when I've actually said this on occasion, I'm making this great profound point, and I'll turn to my people and I'll say, and I have no idea where I was going to go with that point. And I'll just start all over. They'll chuckle, but I realize there was no sense in trying even to recover that. I was so out of my comfort zone, I just stopped. You just learn and work with it. I think that my goal is if I continue to show some consistency, people will forgive.
Yes, and empathy and connection with the audience, which is another basic communication presentation skill, which you do connect. And so there's immense forgiveness, not that that has to happen at all, because people learn so much from you. I thank you so much, Pastor Dave DeSelm, Fellowship Missionary Church. I've learned a lot about your presentation techniques and skills, and also your passion for communication. I always suspected it, and now I know for sure.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for watching The Verbal Edge. I'm Elizabeth Nolf McDonald. I am a communication coach. And if you have any information or suggestion on guests for future shows, please email me at elizabeth@theverbaledge.com. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you very much for watching.